Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to How to Scale Yourself While Growing Your Company. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a director of programs at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you may have just seen in the chat, the Nasdaq Center, along with our partner Mentor Club, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship across all races, industries, and geographies. So find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. Quick housekeeping, we're going to open up for a live Q&A at the end of the event, so please submit those questions for our presenter at the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We'll try to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, BPM, and Hubspot. We're grateful and humbled by their contributions. Now, during these, still in many ways, unique times, we're curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs that we work with. So I'm going to start us off by just taking a quick poll to let us know how you're feeling about your business right now. The year is halfway through. Can't believe it, folks. How are we all doing? We use this to help understand the wellness programs and support systems that we need to develop for our entrepreneurs out there across the world. Alrighty, thank you all for voting. I'm going to give this one more moment, but I don't want to waste too much time before we jump into the good stuff. So I'm going to end this poll. Thank you all for voting. Share these results. Looks like optimism is barely in the lead, followed by survival mode and a little bit of anxiety and a tiny bit of fear. So hopefully our presentation today will help alleviate some of those anxieties. And I know it will, because we're welcoming them back. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome back to our special guest, Connor Drake. He's a senior coach at Mind Maven, where he helps leaders master the superpowers of leverage, intent, and fellowship. Connor, welcome.
Thank you, Colin. It is good to be back. I wish I had half the narrating voice you do, but I've been looking forward to this. It's been almost exactly a year, I think, since I was back here last time. So yeah, it's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone. Thank you guys for joining.
Love it. Well, looking forward to it. Connor, over to you.
All right, excellent. So I'm going to share my screen, guys, so you're not stuck looking at me this entire time. But while I'm doing that, a couple quick housekeeping items. I want to address some very common questions that we get. There we go. You should all be seeing that shortly. Some common questions we get. Happy to share the deck. The most common question we get is the deck going out afterwards? Yes, we're happy to share it. In fact, we've got a wealth of follow-up resources we can share with you after the fact. I think Colin and the team is going to take care of getting that all sent out. So please keep an eye out for that. I really try and make these sessions as interactive as possible. You know, I've got my deck, I've got the content I work through, but I think what really makes these powerful and valuable are people jumping in with their questions. Now, sometimes we have roundtable type settings where everyone has their video on and they can just jump in and interrupt me, and that's great. But I know we have a slightly different setup here now. So please take advantage of the Q&A box or the chat box. I'm going to try and answer all of the questions at the end if I save enough time for that. And if there's questions I don't get to, I'll try and get you answers in a follow-up email in some way, shape, or form. Now, without further ado, if I could just get someone to confirm they are able to see my screen all right, I can dive in and we can get started.
Looks great.
Then let's move on from the boring intro slide. What I like to start this off with are a couple of very common scenarios for the clients that we tend to work with here at Mind Maven. So I'm going to walk you through a couple questions, and I'm curious what resonates. You can just, usually I'd say nod along. I can't see anyone nodding with the setup, but that's all right. You can raise your hand in the attendee box, or you can just, think to yourself that, yes, this resonates. So first off, have you ever had a spare, say 30 minutes, maybe a meeting cancels last minute or whatever, you find yourself with some spare unexpected time And rather than using that time to really focus on something for your business that's going to move the needle and make an impact, you just go into email or into Slack or into Microsoft Teams or any of the other communication and reactivity black holes that we tend to find ourselves in. Now, that's a low-hanging fruit. It's very rare that I have someone who says that they've never encountered that. So let me move on to another one. How often do you find yourself setting your priorities at the start of the week? You feel really, really good. You're finally getting to these things that you've been putting off for weeks, if not months, or if in some cases years. This is the week you're finally going to make progress on that big project. And maybe Monday starts off strong and half of Tuesday, but something comes up on Tuesday afternoon, maybe Wednesday morning, that totally derails your week. Fire comes up, teammate quits, whatever the case may be. And suddenly, before you know it, the week is over. It's Friday, end of day. You look back on the week and feel like you didn't make progress on any of the things that you wanted to do that week. And so you find yourself saying, probably not for the first time, well, I guess there's always next week. And it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle of, well, there's next week, there's next week, there's next week, there's next week, and next week never truly comes, right? All right. How about what we call the field of shoulds? You have this seemingly endless, ever-growing list of things you should be doing, but you never seem to find the time for. A big one for us, for instance, is investing into relationships. I'm going to talk about this in a lot more detail later on, but we're big believers that relationships drive success more than any other factor. And I think, Colin, even you hinted at that a little bit. Mentorship is one of the key types of relationships that you can build. But there's so many types of these relationships, and they're always important but never urgent. They are always shoulds, and until those shoulds become musts, they just don't happen, and it can be frustrating to over and over and over again feel like you just can't find the time for these endless lists of shoulds. Moving on to the last one here, and then I'm going to start getting to the pragmatic side of things. How many times in the last, the slide says 60 days. I usually like shortening this a little bit. How many times in the last 30 days have you dropped everything, all the important work that you've been working on to play the hero, to come to the rescue of your team, or to bail out some big thing, put out a fire, whatever the case may be? It's so often that the leaders that we work with, they start off building their company and it's very proactive. They get to focus on all these really important, high impact, proactive tasks. But as the company grows, becomes more successful, attracts more clients, more customers, fires happen more and more often. And there's almost a high that we get as leaders, as founders, as CEOs, to dropping everything, swooping into the rescue, and being the person who saved the company one more time. The problem is that it's usually at the expense of the work that we know we should be doing. And I see some hands going up in the attendee box. So I appreciate you all nodding along with that. So I'm hoping that some of these points resonate. And in fact, what I'd like to do before we go on any further here is just get a little bit of a feel for which of these pain points resonate. And so we're using a piece of technology we called Slido. And if you were to go to slido.com, there is a big search bar at the top. And if you were to search for Nasdaq Center, or you can use the QR code, I think Cesar, who's helping me run this, can also drop the link into the chat box. You should see a survey asking about a couple pain points. And I'm curious which of those pain points resonate, because it allows me to tailor what direction I'm going to take this speech. There's so many different directions, so many different things I can focus on. And I want to make sure that it's going to be as relevant and as valuable to everyone here as possible. So I'm going to give this a couple moments, let you guys vote. I see some coming in already, and we'll see how the cards stack here. Right now, I'm seeing actually an even split between feeling too reactive and the pain point of feeling too reactive, and the pain point of wanting to feel balanced and wanting to feel fulfilled and believing that's as important as working hard, which is interesting. Usually the feeling of balance is something I have to push the importance of. So I appreciate that everyone here seems to have that belief already. What else do we have? Wanting to be more focused on priorities is all of a sudden the clear winner. Okay. I'm going to give it just another 15, 20 seconds to let some votes come in, see if we see any dramatic shifts. But I think we're starting to see the cards fall where they're going to. Okay, yeah, our clear winner by 64% of people are saying they want to be more focused on their priorities. with that feeling balanced and fulfilled as a second place and being as important as hard work. So feel free to keep voting if you want to keep reading all of that, but that does give me a little bit of context on what I can focus on and the direction I can take this. So again, I'll keep that open if you want to continue voting. But before I dive into the content, allow me to just briefly introduce myself and the company that I'm with. My name's Connor Drake. As Colin said, he gave me a much better intro than I can give myself. And I'm a coach at MindMaven. MindMaven, we're an executive coaching firm. And we help leaders achieve what we call true greatness through relationships. And the thing about true greatness is it's a very subjective term. We have a decent number of attendees right now. And I imagine if I were to sit down with each of you one-on-one and ask you what true greatness means for you, I'm going to get a different answer from everyone. For some people, it's it's building a legacy or making the world a better place or changing the face of the world. Some people have those really big dreams of changing the way the entire world thinks about something or someone. Some people just want to be the best version of themselves and live up to their fullest potential. Some people, want to build a company that's going to provide for their family for generations. There's no right or wrong answer to true greatness. Whatever that means for you is right and good. But one thing remains true. Whatever that definition is, the only way that you can get there is through relationships. And why relationships? Out of all the things you could focus on, there's really, quote unquote, tactical things like, well, I have to raise money. I have to have a great org chart. I have to have a great mission statement. All of that is important. But we believe as a company that relationships are the most important for one very simple reason. You don't know anyone who's reached the top, who's reached their goals and sustained that level of achievement for any meaningful amount of time without help from others. Again, I could put any one of you on the spot, whether you're an attendee, whether you're a panelist with me, I could put you all on the spot, ask you about the biggest achievement that you've had in your life. And if I were to ask you, you could probably identify at least one person, if not multiple people, who made that happen, who, had they not been involved, had they not presented you with an opportunity, made an introduction, whatever it is, you would not have had that achievement. Now, typically, I'd ask you to nod along if that resonates, but I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to assume that most of you are in agreement, because out of the hundreds of times I have had this talk, it's very rare that someone is in disagreement with this. And yet, even though most people know relationships are important, if not vital to success, we continually neglect relationships, or at the very least, we don't invest into them at the level that we know we should. And why is that? It's for a reason I've touched on a little bit already. Relationships are one of those things that are always important. The things that we have to do to invest into relationships, to take care of relationships, they're very, very rarely urgent. And the lives of founders, of leaders, are increasingly urgency driven. There's always a fire. There's always something that needs tending to that feels urgent. And so we always set these things that are important but not urgent to the side and say, well, next week, well, next week, well, next week, well, next month, well, next year, I'll finally find the time to invest into that. And that's not sustainable. So what do we do? And from our perspective at MindMaven, there's really only two viable solutions. You can choose to use the time that you have, however much it is, whether it's an extra hour a day or an extra 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. You can choose to use that time smarter and become much more intentional in how you're allocating the limited time that you have. We call that the skill of intentionality. Or you can free up time. And a big way that we help people do that in the work that we do, we give people back 8+ hours a week by teaching them to work with an EA or a chief of staff in very counterintuitive ways. And for the sake of this speech, I'm going to be focusing largely on this idea of using your time more intentionally. I'm going to give a nod to and talk a little bit about this concept of leverage and freeing up time, just because some of you might be working with an EA or might be moving in that direction sometime in the near-ish future. So I'll give it a nod, but most of our time today is going to be focused on this idea of using your time smarter and investing into relationships. So this idea of intent, becoming more intentional, becoming more proactive. I'm going to share, I think I've got time for 3 things in today's speech. But before I dive into exactly what those tactics are, I want to define productivity, because it's one of those buzzwords in the industry. Everyone likes to write books or articles or blog posts or have podcasts on becoming more productive. but no one really takes the time to define it. For most people, when they talk about making you more productive or being more productive, it really just translates to helping you get more shit done. It's the grind culture, the wake up early, work hard, have a to-do list that's 75 items long and get through all 75 by lunch and then create a new list. That's exhausting. And that's very urgency and reactivity driven. So at MindMaven, when I talk about productivity, when I use that word, we have a very different and hopefully a little less overwhelming definition. We say that being productive simply means getting those things done that get you the results that you want. It's not about getting more done. It's about doing things that get you what you want. And often that translates to doing less. I'd rather you get 3 things done today that really move the needle than 100 things done that might feel good to press a little checkbox next to your task management tool, but don't contribute in any meaningful way, shape, or form beyond giving you a little dopamine rush because you finished something. So to that end, the first principle I want to share with you in helping you be more productive and more focused on generating results that you want is probably the simplest time management principle out there. We definitely did not invent it. In fact, I would say it is the principle at the core of, frankly, every task management approach out there, whether you've read what's David Allen's Getting Things Done, or there's the executive system. There's dozens, if not hundreds, of productivity tools and approaches out there, but they all have a very, very simple idea at their core. It's this: if you always know the one thing that you need to work on now, and the one thing you need to work on next, and you're able to ensure that that one thing is the single most important thing for you to be focusing on, and you can focus on that thing with discipline, it goes without saying that you are going to be at, or at least very near, your most productive self. And that seems like common sense because really it is. A lot of what we teach, a lot of what we do is building systems around these common sense things that we know we should be doing, but we don't do it. And this is important because there's a very important truth that I think every leader, every founder especially, needs to realize. There's a lot of hype and almost prestige around being a great multitasker. But the fact of the matter is, and science backs me up on this, I'm not just making things up, multitasking does not exist. The brain, our brain, everyone's brain is a single attention processor, meaning it focuses on one thing at a time. Anyone who claims that they are a good multitasker, really what they're good at doing is rapid switching. Focus on this thing for a moment, now I'm going to focus to this, now I'm going to switch over to this and this and this. And no matter how good you are at that, there is always a ramp up cost to switching. You have to mentally power down from that one thing you're working on and mentally ramp up to the other. And that's exhausting. That's why a lot of people, they get to the end of the day and they're spent because they spent all day jumping back and forth between tasks and in many cases not getting to a meaningful place on any of them. So if you can adopt this principle of now and next, of knowing the things you need to work on now and the things you need to work on next, having that absolute clarity of what those are, having the confidence that those things are the most important thing you'd be focusing on, and then having the willpower and the systems in place to focus on those things with discipline, you're going to see a huge improvement. And the simplest way to do this consistently is by having some sort of a task management system. A lot of people for task management, they use their inbox or they use their head or maybe an Excel spreadsheet, whatever. I really recommend having some sort of a dedicated task management tool. Most people have tried that before, and you end up with a list that looks a little bit like this. I can turn on my laser pointer here because it's fun to play with. And you've got this long list of tasks, and you've got this scroll bar here where it goes on and on and on, and it ends up becoming overwhelming. If you wake up in the morning and you see this list of things that you need to get done, your brain is going to shut down and give up before you even have a chance to get started. It causes a mental overload, and you throw in the towel and say, you know what, I'm going to go back to the way I was doing things. I'm just going to track it all in my head. That's less overwhelming. Now, the one thing I do want to point out before I give you an alternative, a better way of looking at this is the one thing that this person in this screenshot did right is they are putting everything that is a task that they need to do exists in this tool. The problem is that you don't need to see everything that you need to do at once. In my task management tool, I use Sauna. Personally, we use that as a company. I probably have 500 tasks in there at least. from the 6, 7, 8 years I've been working at MindMaven now, however long it's been. And they're all things that I eventually would like to get done or consider getting done, but I only need to see 5 of them, 6 of them, 7 of them at a time. So that's all I'm going to have time to focus on today. So this is what I would love for your task management approach to look like instead. And again, this isn't a Sauna screenshot because that's what we use. We're not associated with them in any way. I don't mean to push them. It's the best tool that we found. It's the one that we teach most of our clients. But at the end of the day, and this is vitally important, it is not about the tool. A lot of people chase the newest tool with the newest features. It is not about that. You can make a pen and paper approach work. It's about the systems you put in place behind the tool. Now, please don't do pen and paper. There's better ways, but Asana, Trello, Monday, Todoist, there's dozens of tools out there. Pick one. If you don't already have one, I recommend Asana. For 90% of people, the free plan gets the job done just fine. And have a place where you can start putting all of your tasks. Create a system of trust where everything that is a to-do in your life lives. And there's a few things I want to point out about this, the way that we have this view set up that you can apply to whatever tool you end up using. The first thing, and in my opinion, the most important thing, is this section right up here at the top that says top priorities. These are not necessarily tasks that you are doing and checking off today. These are your 3 most important priorities that should be guiding your actions over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Whatever time frame feels right. I'd say at least 3 and at most 12 months. What are the 3 big things you need to do that will have the biggest impact on the company? I want you to know what those are. A lot of people don't. If you are one of those people, that's fine. I've been working with founders and CEOs long enough. I've worked with founders who have companies of hundreds, if not thousands of people. I ask them what their top priorities are. They don't know because they've been so focused on building and reacting and firefighting. They never took the time to sit down and figure out what those top priorities are. So if you haven't, please get clear on what those are and write them in a very actionable way. Don't just say, for instance, fundraise. Say, hey, we need to raise an $8 million Series A. You should be able to say with confidence, yes, we achieved this goal, or no, we didn't. So figure out what those priorities are and have them somewhere where you see them every single day. That's what most people do wrong. Even if they do come up with what their priorities are, they put them in some vision document that they review maybe once a quarter when they sit down with the team. These need to be so present in your life that if I were to break into your house at 3 a.m., wake you up out of a dead sleep and say, hey, what are your top priorities? You should be able to rattle them off to me without even needing to stop and think about it. So figure out what those priorities are, have them at the top of your to-do list so you always see them so that they guide the actions that you're doing on a daily basis. Which brings me down to this next section down here, this now and next. These are the tasks, the things that you are doing today. What are your actual to-dos on your list for the day in order of priority? So you start your day off by figuring out, here's my task for the day, here's the order I'm doing them in. And everything on here, or most things on here at least, should in some way, shape, or form contribute to one of these 3 priorities here at the top. If they don't, it's an opportunity for you to pause and ask yourself if you should really be doing it. Now, sometimes you just have to get things done. I get it. But if the answer is a clear no, this does not relate to one of these priorities, see if you can find a way to either delegate the task or eliminate the task. It doesn't truly need to be done. All right, for the sake of time, that is all I'm going to mention on setting up a task management tool right now. Beyond the fact that one very important task is this morning routine. It would be a shame to move on without mentioning this. So I am going to find a hidden slide in here somewhere. Yes. All right. Having a morning routine task is probably what's going to make whatever task management system, whatever approach you take, work. Now, if you're not in this task management tool every single day, then it starts to lose its value. It starts to become this list that feels unachievable. So having a routine that's 5 to 7 minutes long, I'm not going to be one of the people who stands up here and says, here's the 45, 90-minute routines of 12 billionaires where they wake up at 4:30 a.m. and make a green smoothie and then go for a run and then meditate for 20 minutes and then take their kids out for ice cream. It's not sustainable. Or for most people, it's not sustainable. For me, it's definitely not sustainable. I would rather you have one thing that takes 7 minutes that you can do consistently. And this is a rough example of what a morning routine might look like. I'll walk through a couple items here, not all of them, but the reviewing of your calendar as the first step is important. take a look at your to-do or your calendar for the day and see how much time you really have for work. If you're in a day of back-to-back meetings and all you have is an hour-long break to work on tasks, then you may only have 1 or 2 items on your to-do list for the day because that is all you have time for. And that's fine. Going back to this idea of now and next, if you're confident that those 1 or 2 things are the most important things as determined by your top priorities, then that is a good use of your time. Versus a day where you have no meetings and you've got a bunch of open space. Well, you may have 8, 9, or 10 tasks on your to-do list. So start by looking at your calendar and get a realistic assessment of how much time you have that day. And then just clean up your task list. If there's anything you need to check off or accept is irrelevant here, but it's essentially clean up your task list, put your tasks for the day in order of priority. And then finally, the last step here, and this is very intentionally the last step here, open your inbox. I would highly recommend that you do not navigate the inbox until you have run this morning routine. Because really at the end of the day, all the inbox is a bunch of other people telling you how they think you should spend your time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You do have to get things done when your team needs you to review something or provide feedback on something. That's got to get done. That's fine. But I would rather you set your priorities and your tasks for the day and then slot in other tasks around those priorities than start your day with other people's priorities and try and slot your priorities around those. Usually that's a recipe for that getting to the end of the week and missing the train and saying, well, I guess there's always next week. So if nothing else, walk away from this with the permission, if you will, to leave your inbox off until you've had a chance to set your tasks up for the day. Okay, I am going to start shifting away from the conversation around task management here. If you have any questions around that, again, please drop it into chat. I may not answer it this second, but there are going to be questions we can get to at the end. Without further ado, let's move on to the second of 3 tips I want to give you around this idea of intent and using your time more wisely. A concept we call white space time. This is, well, I'm a little biased, but probably one of the most valuable things that we teach our clients. It's one of the things that I repeatedly get feedback from clients on being a game changer. And it's not something we invented. It's really our brand name, our fancy term for calendar blocking. White space time is simply weekly recurring blocks built into your calendar that are dedicated to proactive work. When I say recurring blocks, ideally that means the same day and time every single week you have blocked off for white space time, for proactive work. And ideally here, we're looking at a minimum of 4 consecutive hours. A lot of people have tried calendar blocking and failed in the past because they maybe put an hour block on their calendar and it got scheduled over, or they had the hour, but it didn't feel like it was a good use of time. Most people have tried calendar blocking. There's a couple differences when it comes to white space time that I can give you that'll, I think, make this approach work for you. The first is, of course, same day and time every week. Make it be consistent. If you have to schedule it every single week at a different day and time, it's not going to happen. You've got other things to focus on, and making this get on your calendar every single week just will not happen. So pick a day, pick a time, make it happen. So number 1. Number 2 is come up with a list of rules, a short list of rules around what takes precedent over white space time. Very, very often, we don't do that. So when a request comes in, someone says, hey, Connor, can I meet with you, Wednesday at 2? I need you to review this blog post. I need to get your feedback on it. And we look at the calendar, and the only thing on the calendar during that time is white space time. So we say, sure, yeah, I'll slot that on there. Well, in actuality, reviewing that blog post was not more important than the white space time, the dedicated proactive work that I've been needing to do all week. So having a short list of rules of what types of meetings or what types of requests can take precedent over white space time goes a long way. And that can be as simple as, and I'd recommend it be as simple as, personal emergencies. Obviously, anything with family, anything in life, if you need to take someone to the doctor or whatever, that is, of course, infinitely more important than white space time. Take care of yourself, take care of your family. And number 2 would be work emergencies. Not things that feel urgent, but things that are truly urgent, where if you do not drop everything and do this right now, something's going to blow up, something is going to fall apart. Everything else can fit around white space time rather than white space time having to fit around other tasks. So get clear on what your exceptions are for white space time. So when a request inevitably comes in and someone says, hey, can I meet with you Wednesday at 2 in the middle of your white space time? You can review this list and see, hey, does it meet one of these rules? If the answer is no, then the answer is no. When you say, hey, I'd love to review the blog post with you. I'm totally booked up during that time. Can we do the following day? Or even, can we do a couple hours later? This block will become one of the most valuable, most important blocks on your calendar if you let it be. So that's number 2, create these retaining walls around your time by getting clear on what the rules are. And then number 3, probably the smallest change you can make, but one of the most impactful, is assigning value to these calendar blocks in advance. The problem is if all you do is put a block on your calendar that says, white space time or proactive work from Wednesdays, on Wednesdays from 12 to 4, whatever, there is no inherent value assigned to that time, which makes it very easy to schedule over when someone asks you to review the blog post. Well, what the value of reviewing a blog post is. I'm going to be able to review this, give feedback, they'll get it on the website, we'll get more viewers, more readers, whatever. There is clear value in that versus this ambiguous, vague white space block in your calendar. So once a week, I highly recommend figuring out what you want to use that week's white space time for, and then update the calendar block accordingly. So rather than just saying white space time, it's now white space time dash, HR recruiting job description, or whatever the important proactive work is that you've been meaning to get to for the last weeks, months, if not years. Rename the calendar block so when that request comes in for the blog post, you can compare value. Is the blog post more important than hiring this chief of staff role? Well, of course it isn't. So it makes it much easier to say no to the blog post, or not no, but no, not now. Let me slot you in somewhere else. So quick review on white space. 1, same day and time every single week, minimum of 4 consecutive hours. Number 2, build retaining walls around that time by having clear rules around when it can be rescheduled. And that list of rules should be short. It doesn't need to be any more than the 2 I gave you, personal emergencies and work emergencies. But if it needs to be, maybe you're in the middle of fundraising and investor meetings have to take priority, that's fine. Just get clear in advance what those exceptions are. And then number 3, rename the calendar invite on a weekly basis for the task that you're using that time for. I hope all of that makes sense. Kind of like with task management, there is a lot more to it than I have time to go into, but we do have a book that we wrote on it, and Colin and the team are going to be sending out a list of resources afterwards. And that's going to include a link to the PDF of the book. If this resonates and feels like something that you want to make happen, and I do recommend it's something that you invest into, check out the book. It's written in a way where it's meant to be easy to skim, or you can do a deep dive in and read it word for word, however you prefer to do it. Just get this time on your calendar. In fact, if you want to get it on your calendar now while I'm talking, I promise I won't be offended. All right, any questions around white space time, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat box, and I will get to those. But I'm going to move on to my 3rd tip around intent, we call the art of no. And my slide is, there we go. Now it's working for me. Our art of no module, when we're teaching clients to this, it's not really based on teaching you when to say no, because in my experience, most people know when to say no. You get that, if someone asks you to do something and it's not aligned with your priorities, it's not a good use of time, you get that gut-wrenching feeling of, I know I shouldn't do this, but I feel obligated to for whatever reason. I don't need to teach you when to say no. What I need to do is teach you how to say no in a way that enables you to do so consistently and allows you to feel good. Now, a lot of times we don't say no because no feels like a negative experience. We've all been rejected, and we don't want to deliver that type of rejection feeling to someone else. And so we're all built, this whole idea is built around how do you say no to people, whether it's your team or someone in your network reaching out, asking for something from you that's not aligned with your priorities. How do you turn them down in a way that empowers them? In some cases, still gets them what they need while still protecting your time and your priorities. And really, this whole idea is built on the quote from Steve Jobs you can see on the screen there. And he said something to the effect of, this is a little bastardized, but focus means saying no to 100 other good ideas. I'm as proud of the things that I haven't done as the things I have. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. What I'd like to do is give you some strategies, some easy ways that you can feel more comfortable saying no to people in your life so you can better protect your time Even if it's just protecting white space time. Someone reaches out, wants to meet with you, but it's in the middle of your white space time. How do you say no in a way that protects the time, provides value to the other person, and still leaves you feeling good? And there's 3 tactics I can give you here. They're all very simple. The first is positivity. A no, a rejection is, by its very nature, a negative experience. When someone reaches out and asks you something, there's an inherent momentum. And no can be a little bit like throwing a brick wall in front of people. It doesn't feel good. So if we can cushion that brick wall a little bit by having some genuine positivity, I'm not telling you to, I'm trying to think of a better analogy than blow smoke up someone's ass, but I've got nothing now. I'm not telling you to make things up. Don't lie. But if you can offer some genuine positivity to the person, around why you appreciate them reaching out, why you appreciate their request, whatever it may be, pad the negativity with a little bit of genuine positivity, goes a long way. 2, provide rationale. This is a big one. Our brains are built to rationalize. If you've ever, hopefully I'm not the only one who had this experience, maybe you decide, okay, tomorrow morning, finally, after months, if not years of putting this off, I'm going to start going for my morning run. I'm going to start exercising again, finally. And you feel really good when you make that commitment at 9 o'clock at night and you're getting into bed and you say, okay, tomorrow morning, I'm finally making this happen. My alarm is set for 6 a.m. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to go for a run. It's going to be great. And you fall asleep. You have great dreams. The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. And the moment that alarm goes off, your brain starts rationalizing all the reasons you shouldn't go for that run. You had a bad night's sleep. Maybe you're starting to come down with something, or you've got a really busy day and you benefit from more rest. Whatever the case is, they're not good rationalizations, but they are rationalizations, and they often work. You rationalize yourself into staying in bed, going back to sleep, and perpetuating that cycle of, well, I will do it tomorrow. So all I want you to do is tap into the brain's natural desire to rationalize and give people a rationalization on why you're saying no, not to them as an individual, but to the situation, to the type of request. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a moment. I know it's all theory right now, but it'd be something like, hey, I really appreciate you. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm trying not to take outside meetings right now. I'm actually focused on recruiting this quarter. So, I'm not doing outside meetings. Well, now you're not saying no to them as an individual. You're saying no to all outside meetings. And that takes a lot of the sting of rejection away. And finally, tip number 3, shifting their focus. Again, someone comes to you with a request, there is an inherent momentum. No is throwing up a brick wall in front of them. Doesn't feel good to go from 60 to 0 all of a sudden. So if you can take that energy, if you can take that momentum and direct it elsewhere, to somewhere other than you, then they can still get what they need while you protect your time. So let me give you an example of a very common type of request that if you're not getting this request now, as your company scales, as you become more successful, you will start getting this email multiple times a week. And it looks a little something like this. Hey, Blake, we haven't met yet. My name's Arjun. I followed your story since I first read about it on Product Hunt a few years back. You've been a huge inspiration. I'm actually close to one of your board members, Abby Winters. Everyone loves a good name drop, right? She has nothing but great things to say about you. And speaking of which, I wanted to reach out and see if I could pick your brain. A pick your brain email. Like, can I buy you a cup of coffee email? I'm working on finding product market fit for my startup, blah, 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 given your success. Could I buy you a cup of coffee, hear about your experience? Is that something you'd be open to? When you get an email like this once a month, a couple times a quarter, not the end of the world to say yes. You're paying it forward. You're, delivering a great experience to people. You're kind of being a mentor, and that's a good thing. When you start seeing emails like this every single week, you can't say yes. As much as you might want to say yes, it is no longer a good use of your time or your company's resources, which your time is, to say yes to every single one of these requests. But often we want to, we want to pay it forward. We want to say yes to the types of emails. You've probably sent emails like this yourself, and you hope that the person writes back and says yes. So you want to be the type of person who does. So how do you say no to these emails when you need to start protecting your time a little bit better? You can take each of those 3 elements that I talked through on the previous slide and write an email like this. Hey, Arjun, I really appreciate you reaching out, and I'm so glad my stories inspired you. And you've got a little bit of the positivity there. Now, in my opinion, it's very weak positivity. I think you can do better. If you can find some genuine comment around, why you appreciate him reaching out, or, something about his story, whatever. But that's better than nothing. You got your positivity. That said, I'm heads down on recruiting this quarter, trying not to take outside meetings. There's your rationale. You're not saying no to Arjun, you're saying no to all outside meetings. Even so, I do want to help. First, I recommend you check out this blog post I wrote answering some of the most common questions I've gotten over the years. Here's your focus shift. Now, if you start getting a bunch of these, hey, can I pick your brain? Want to hear about your experience emails? You might consider writing a blog post, but you don't have to. You can find other people's content. Here's a great podcast on, starting a company. Here's a book that I read that I found immensely valuable. Whatever, you're shifting their focus away from you towards something else where they can still get the answers they're looking for. They just don't have to go through you. And this final element here, a bit of a bonus element, for those who are truly high quality, Arjun in this case was simply because he was connected to a board member, as you might remember. You can go the extra mile and say something like this. If you still have questions afterwards, feel free to send me your top 3, but please also include what you think the answers are based on your own perspective and research. This will give me some context on where your head's at so I can address them better. Would you be willing to do that? I'm looking forward to hearing back. Cheers, Blake. Now, I guarantee if you send this email, 50% of the time, at least, you're never going to hear from this person again. They don't want to have to take the time to think of their questions, do research themselves, figure out what they think the answers are. They just want your time. And if all they want is your time, they are not worth your time. Be protective of it. And if someone does come back and they write a meaningful email back saying, hey, read the blog post, really appreciate that. Here's some specific questions I have, and here's what I think the answers are. That is a very good indication of someone who is high quality and probably worth investing a little bit of time in. Even then, that doesn't mean you have to take a meeting. You can use a product like Loom, Loom, or any other video recording feature to record yourself answering those questions. And you can send that to them. You can send them a 5 to 7 minute clip. They get the answers they were looking for. You protected your time, and you can feel really good about the way you rejected this person. Frankly, you gave them everything they were looking for. And frankly, probably taught them a valuable lesson too in doing their own research, finding their own answers in a fraction of your time. So learning how to leverage this idea of positivity, rationale, focus shift, and some extra value when it's appropriate. It's not appropriate every single time. If you're getting a copy pasted email from someone and it's clear they sent this exact thing out to 75 other founders, don't bother. But you can still provide the positivity, rationale, and focus shift in those situations. Does that all make sense? You can obviously use this in any type of situation. You can use it for a team member reaching out and saying, hey, can you review this blog post? When you hired them to take care of blog posts, why are you still getting pulled into the blog post creation process? Well, positivity, rationale, shift the focus back to, hey, I trust you to do this. You can use it in any number of ways. All right, and that's what I have for you on this whole idea of intent and taking the time that you have, no matter how much it is, and protecting it and using it well. Any questions around that, again, feel free to drop them in the chat box. But for the sake of time, I am going to go ahead and move on and touch on this idea of leverage very briefly. Again, this is all about working with an EA or a chief of staff. So I am curious. We can do this either just a raise of hands if you want to drop something in the chat, that's fine. But is anyone in here working with an EA right now? All right, I'm not seeing a whole lot pop in, so I'm thinking probably not, so I'm justified in not doing a bunch on this. That said, this is something I want you to be thinking about, because the time to hire an EA is probably sooner than you think, sooner than most people think. Okay, I see one hand up, someone who might be working with one. So if you are, great. There's going to be a lot that you can take away from this. If you're not, it's still something that I would, an EA as an executive assistant, a virtual assistant, whatever language you want to use around that, working with an assistant of some kind. And when we talk about working with an assistant, we think about things in a little different way. We recommend that any leader, any founder, hire an assistant and turn them into what we call an engagement manager or an EM. We use different language simply because we think about this role in a dramatically different way than most people think about an EA. So an EM, or an engagement manager, it's kind of like a cross between, let's say, a highly skilled chief of staff and a very intuitive executive assistant. And they're really focused on helping you do three things. First off, they're going to help you protect your time, of course. They're going to help you free up time by getting as many things off your plate as possible, including the obvious things that you would imagine, like scheduling, travel management. All of that should fall within the purview of this engagement manager, but also a lot of really unintuitive, or not unintuitive, but uncommon ways. And I'll walk you through an example or two, but only briefly. And then, of course, they're going to help you invest some of that time into relationships, because we're all about relationships. So I'm going to do one example just for the sake of time. One of my favorite examples and ways you can work with an EM to free up time, use the time well, and invest into relationships all at once is through what we call e-drafting, which really means this. If I have a meeting with someone, and I have a lot of, usually 30, 60-minute meetings a day, I want to make sure that I send a follow-up email after every single meeting, because it delivers a good experience to people. People appreciate follow-up emails as long as they're meaningful and they're not the one-liner, hey, great meeting you. Looking forward to talking more soon. Thanks, Connor. That adds noise to someone's inbox, not value. But a meaningful follow-up email provides value and invests into the relationship. But to write one of those, that's a 15-minute undertaking, maybe. And if you're in back-to-back meetings, 15 minutes adds up very, very quickly. So with my EM, Andy, who is amazing, adore her, she is a lifesaver. The way my workflow works is I walk out of this meeting, or close down the meeting, and I pull out my phone, open a dictation app, and I dictate a rough outline of that follow-up email. Something like, hey, Andy, this is a follow-up email for our meeting today with John Smith. Let's say something like, hey, John, it was great to meet you. I really appreciate you carving out the time, and loved your insights around autonomous vehicles. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective before, but the moral dilemma is fascinating. Something truly personal that shows that this is an email I wrote specifically for this interaction. It's not a template I'm using over and over and over again. So I ramble my way through an email, maybe spend 45, 60 seconds doing so. That gets shipped over to Andy. She receives that, listens to it, turns it into an email draft on my behalf, and places it in my drafts folder. And this email, she's not transcribing for me. She's taking the gist of these dictations and turning them into an email that reads like it's coming from me, and is as close to ready to send as possible. And she just marks it ready. She's not sending anything on my behalf. That is a recipe for disaster. But she's writing it for me, marking it ready, so I know when I sit down in my inbox at the end of the day, and I've been in back-to-back meetings the last 4 hours, I have all of these pre-written email drafts ready for me to review. If they need some minor edits, great. Usually isn't going to take me more than 5 to 10 seconds per email. Make a couple minor edits, press send, and I can get all of these emails out the door in, frankly, in many cases, less time than it would take me to write one email if I were doing this entire process myself. So that is a way a great EM can help you save the time that you'd invest into follow-up emails, and protect the time, because you can now use that time for more important things, and invest into relationships, because you were writing a follow-up email that really shows the person you met with that you care, that the meeting had value, because you're capturing the action items. And it just, all in all, delivers a great experience. And that's, of course, just one way you can work with an EM. We like saying that for a founder of, say, a 30 to 50 person company, we can get them back 10 hours a week. So all I did is give you the bottom of the top of the iceberg. That's one of the minor time saving ways. There are so many ways that you can work with a resource like an EM to free up huge amounts of huge swaths of time at once. And I do want to respect that many of you may not be at the point where you're hiring an EA right now, and that's fine. I'm not here to say that no matter where you are, you should hire an EA. So that's in many cases not true. I think the smallest size company I've worked with, it was a 4-person company, and he hired an EA. That is not normal. He saw immense value in it, and relationship management was a huge part of his role. So we wanted someone to help manage those relationships. But I would say if you've hit, say, either a 30-person company or a team of 30 people that you are managing, and you don't have an EA, at that point, you were starting to sabotage yourself pretty dramatically. And through sabotaging yourself as a leader, you're also sabotaging the team or the company. So 30 people, regardless of where you're at right now with your company, isn't necessarily that far in the future. So I'm telling you all this not to say hire an EA right now or hire an EM right now. I just want you to be aware that this role exists. So when the time does come, and it'll probably be sooner than you think, you're aware that you don't have to think about it in just this binary typical EA fashion. There's a lot of ways you can provide value and free up time. So any questions on the EA front, feel free to drop them in. Otherwise, I am going to move on from this. I know many of you aren't working with one right now. If the time does come or you feel like, hey, in the next 3-6 months, I think I do want to hire a role like this. We do have a recruiting arm of our company at MindMaven. We specialize in placing and training EMs. Happy to help with that. You can reach out to myself or anyone on the team and we can help with that. But I'm going to move on from this topic for now and talk about what to do with this time that you free up. Whether you're working with an EA or not, if all you do is adopt the principles of intent and you get white space time in your calendar, you start saying no more often, you free up some time, what do you do with it? And really, at the end of the day, it's your time. You could do whatever you want with it. But if I can make a recommendation, I'd say 2 things. Number 1, invest into some form of self-care or mindfulness, whatever that means for you. I'm not saying you have to sit down and meditate for 15 minutes. Although if that resonates with you and calls you, great, do it. It can be reading a book, going for a walk, do something that fills your cup. I know it's a cliche to say that you, as an empty cup, you can't fill anyone else's, but you do not help your company, your team, your organization by burning yourself out and playing the hero and working longer and longer hours and doing more and more things if it's not sustainable. If all you're doing is building toward burnout, everything that you were building right now will burn right along with you. So invest into some form of self-care, whatever that looks like for you. And then the remaining time, at least a decent chunk of it, invest into building relationships, or we call it the skill of building fellowship. And when we talk about fellowship or relationship management, as a leader and as a founder, there's really 2 types of relationships you need to be focusing on. The first are team relationships. And when we talk about investing in team relationships, this means convincing the top talent, people who can really change the game for you, convincing them to join you and follow you through, well, frankly, through hell and back. Even wildly successful startups have really low lows. And you want people who don't just believe in the company, but believe in you as a leader, because the company is going to have ups and downs. People's belief in the company may waver, but if their belief in you as a person doesn't waver because you invest into those relationships, because they believe, they know you care about them, and as a result, they care about you, then people stick with you. And then there's tribe fellowship. And tribe is your general network. The people who send you opportunities, who say, hey, met this amazing engineer I think you should hire, or hey, here's an investor I think might be interested in your company, or hey, here's a potential mentor, here's some industry insights, whatever. Investing into tribe fellowship means convincing your network to actively support you by sending you opportunities. And these can be hugely game-changing opportunities. As we talked about before, you don't know anyone who's reached the top without help from others. And that's where tribe fellowship comes into play. I'm going to focus primarily on tribe today, simply because team starts to be relevant. Well, it's relevant from day one, but it starts to become challenging, I'd say around the 30-person mark again. You start hiring people and you don't necessarily know everyone's name in the company anymore. You start feeling more and more disconnected as a leader. And when that starts to set in, having systems and workflows in place to allow you to consistently continue investing into those relationships is hugely important. But for today, we're focusing on tribe. But the first tip I'll give you around this idea of fellowship really is, it works both team and tribe. And it's based on this idea that relationships that are, for many people, an ambiguous term. What is a relationship? What determines the quality of a relationship? We define it this way. Relationships are defined very simply by the sum of all past and present interactions you've had with someone. Or to put that almost criminally simply here, if you've never interacted with someone before, you don't have a relationship with them. If you've interacted with someone a ton, but they're all very shallow relationships, or I'm sorry, very shallow interactions, and you have a very shallow relationship with them. Whereas if you have someone that you interact with consistently and on a meaningful level, then you have a meaningful relationship with them. So to that end, for the people that matter to you, for the most influential people in your network, in your company, you need to ensure that every interaction that you deliver, that you craft, will be perceived by the recipient as meaningful, relevant, and valuable. And the easiest way you can do that is with the skill that we call positive alacrity. It's this is one of those concepts that has caught on outside of MindMaven, and it's been really cool to see this terminology start popping up. Other places you may have heard of it already, but it's a very simple idea. And positive alacrity is simply the skill of delivering what we call micro moments. So these are very small interactions you have with people that have a profoundly uplifting impact on them. Or as our founder, Patrick, likes to say, this is also probably the simplest, the easiest, and most scalable way to make others happy. And in doing so, make yourself happy. And it's all based on a very, very simple, very common sense habit. And you're going to hear this, I'm going to preface this, you're going to hear this and you're going to think, well, duh. And this is a well, duh moment. This is common sense. The problem with common sense is that it's not always common practice. The positive alacrity is this. When you think something positive about someone else that you genuinely believe, voice it. So often we have these little thoughts about people throughout the day. If someone does something great and you think, oh, that's a great way of thinking about that. I had never considered it that way. Or I appreciate them going out of their way to provide a great answer. We have these small thoughts many times throughout the day. I'd say at least, bare minimum, you have at least one of these thoughts a day. And very often we don't voice them for any number of reasons, but often it doesn't feel, you're in the middle of something, you don't have time to voice it. When really all it's going to do is cost you seconds of your day, and it can make someone else's day entirely. And an example I can give you, and this is based on a story from one of our clients, is this. I'd like you to imagine that your team is heads down on some sort of project at work. You're getting ready for an update that's about to launch in a couple of weeks. And despite all the craziness, all the rush, and everyone having a million responsibilities, you notice that a team member, maybe one of your founding team members, spending some extra time training up an intern. And at the end of the day, what you do is you, positive alacrity, as this team member is getting ready to leave, you pull them aside for a moment. And you say something like, hey, I know your workload's crazy right now. We've got a million things going on, but I couldn't help but notice that you slowed down enough to help our intern, we include an actual name there, to help Aaron learn pivot tables in Excel. And I wanted to say, I think that was really awesome. As a founder, that means a lot to me. A big part of our culture is taking care of other people. And I thought it was really cool to see you going out of your way to do that. 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds, maybe, to deliver that interaction. And I guarantee when this person goes home, this is one interaction for you. Maybe you'll interact with it and you'll forget about it. When this team member goes home and their spouse, their partner, their friend, someone asks, hey, how was your day? They could have had an awful day. This will be the one story they remember enough to share. It was awful, but I had this great interaction with Blake. And it shows that you care, and it delivers, as simple as it is, it delivers a really powerful message to your team that you're there for them, you recognize them, you see them, and that they mean something to you. So if you can get in the habit of doing this once a day, one positive alacrity experience a day, whether it's someone on your team or just someone in your network, it's going to go a long way, and it's going to help you deliver these types of meaningful, relevant, valuable interactions that people crave, people need. And all of this is because relationships, as I have belabored toward over and over again, we believe relationships drive success more than any other individual factor. And one example I can give you, I wish I could claim this was a client, this was before MindMaven's time, and it's just a great example. There was the founder of one of the early big names in mobile gaming. And they, from the very beginning, or relatively early on, they realized, hey, I don't know if I'm ever going to want to sell this company one day, but maybe I will at some point. And so starting to invest into and build those relationships now with potential acquirers isn't necessarily a bad idea. And so together with one of their board members, they identified who these potential acquirers were and started building relationships with the people in the corporate development sphere, not with the goal of saying, hey, do you want to buy the company? Just building relationships with them. And one day they did end up getting an offer out of the blue for the company for $200 million. And that was mind-blowing enough for the founder at the time. But the board member said, hey, let's not jump on this. Let's let everyone, all the corp dev people we've been building relationships with, let's let them know that this offer came in. And they ended up starting a bidding war for the company. And over the course of 7 days, they sold the company for $400 million. In other words, they doubled the valuation of their company just through relationships that they built over time. That's not something that you can achieve with just, we say, just strategy, just hiring, just organizational structure. All of that is important, and you need that to have a successful company. But none of that is going to double your company's valuation over the span of 7 days. And many of you are probably thinking, well, I don't want to sell my company, or my goal isn't to, build a company that is, going to be sold for $400 million. That's fine. An exit is one example of many. Whatever it is that you want for your company, for your team, it's going to come from relationships. And relationships are the one thing, I'm going to speed through this slide and just drive this point home, that your network, your relationships are the one thing that you have access to as a founder that is nearly bottomless. Your time is finite, capital, money that you have access to, even if you're a great fundraiser, that is finite. The opportunities available in your network are borderline infinite if you can get skilled at leveraging these relationships, investing into them and generating opportunities from them. Whether those opportunities are, talent, getting connected with talent, or, new customers and clients, investors, acquirers, PR opportunities, mentorship, industry insights. These are the things that if you can generate these opportunities naturally from your network, there are people out there who pay thousands, tens of thousands, in some cases, millions of dollars to access these opportunities. As a young company, you do not have access to millions of dollars to generate opportunities. You do not need it if you have the skill of investing into these relationships, delivering great experiences to the people in your network who can send you these types of opportunities. That's the key when people talk about being a scrappy founder, or resource effective is the big buzzword right now. Resource effective founders are just really good at generating opportunities from their network. It's that simple. It's also often called serendipity. The right person in your network thinking about you at the right time and connecting you with an opportunity. Every single person on this call, panelist and attendee alike, has some sort of story, either related to your company or outside your company, of serendipity, of the right person coming across an opportunity, thinking of you, sending you that opportunity, and as a result, something great happens. It could be about closing a sale. It could be something in your personal life. You got connected with your spouse because a friend of yours met them somewhere, thought of you, connected them with you, and now you've been together 7 years. That's serendipity. That is an opportunity generating itself because you built relationships with the right people. The problem is this idea of serendipity or opportunity generation. For a lot of founders, they think it's luck-based. It's something that happens or it doesn't happen. And there's not a lot that you can do to make it happen. You can probably guess we disagree. In fact, we built our entire company on disagreeing with that concept. We believe that referrals and opportunity generation are all driven by a very simple process. And if you know what that process is, then you can start to leverage it. If you can leverage it, you can generate them more consistently. So the question is, what drives referrals? There's really every opportunity you have ever received. There were two things that took place behind the scenes to make that opportunity happen. The first is timing. And timing is literally the moment in time someone in your network encountered the type of opportunity you want to hear about. Someone was at a networking event, met a brilliant engineer, happened to know that you were trying to hire an engineer, and connected you with them. That's timing. The issue with timing is that you have almost no control over it. Opportunities happen when they happen. And unless you're forcing people to go to events or putting them in places where they're going to encounter these types of opportunities, there's not a whole lot you can do to influence it. That's the bad news. Two pieces of good news is, one, there are more opportunities happening in your network than you could possibly even hope to process. Even if you had the perfect system in place and you were generating every opportunity available in your network, There are hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of opportunities happening right now in your network. You do not need to hear about 100% of them. You don't need to hear about 50 or even 20%. You're probably hearing about 2 to 3% right now. If we can go from 2 to 3 to 5 to 6, that's doubling. And if we can double the amount of opportunities that you're hearing about, that is game changing. So that's good news number one. Good news number two is that although we have no control over timing, we have full control over what we call mind share. And that is just how top of mind you are with someone in your network. So when they encounter that opportunity, when timing strikes, how likely are they to think of you versus literally anyone else in their network? Why are they going to think of you and send that opportunity to you? Well, you have control over that by managing your mind share. The problem is that most people do not manage their mind share. And what happens is something a little bit like this. So let's say you meet with someone for the very first time, you have lunch with them. The moment that lunch ends and they leave that meeting, you more or less have 100% mind share with them. Meaning, if on the way from the lunch venue to their car, they happen to encounter the perfect opportunity for you, there is a very good chance they're going to say, hey, there's someone I have to connect you with. I think they're still here. Let me run and track them down really quick. Unfortunately, life doesn't usually work that way. These opportunities usually present themselves weeks, if not months, and in some cases years after the first time you meet someone. And so what often happens is we have that meeting and nothing happens, and a month passes and 2 months and 3 months, and somewhere in that span, an opportunity came up that you didn't hear about. And then maybe month 6, you realize, God, it's been 6 months that I reached out to John. I should follow up with them, see what's going on. And you reach out, you arrange another lunch, and it's great. You're looking forward to it. And the first thing John says when you sit down with him to lunch is, I feel awful. I just a month or two ago, I came across this amazing engineer, and I know you mentioned that you were hiring for that. I can't believe I didn't think of you. I'm so sorry. And our gut reaction is to be annoyed. Like, well, how could you not think of me? I told you that's what I was looking for. But it's not John's fault. His brain, our brains, everyone's brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what is most relevant to us. And if you let 6 months pass with no interaction between you and John, you made yourself irrelevant to the point where his brain was not capable of thinking of you. He could come across the perfect opportunity. You were so far from his mind that he had no chance, no hope of thinking of you. That's what we want to avoid. What we'd ideally have is a graph that looks a little bit more like this. You have that lunch meeting, then immediately after the lunch meeting, you send a follow-up email. Whether you do that with your EM through dictation, like I walked you through, or you write it yourself, either way, you send a follow-up email. So he thinks about you again right after the meeting. And then maybe a couple of weeks after that, you send an introduction of some kind. Hopefully you use that meeting with John to learn a little bit about him, and you found out that he's trying to hire a specific role. So maybe you make an introduction. Or he's struggling with productivity, so you send a podcast on task management or whatever the case. So you learn a little bit about John over the course of that meeting. So over the course of weeks and months, you can send these little touch points. You're not scheduling 30-minute meetings with them every week. You're just sending these minor emails saying, hey, was thinking of you. You mentioned you're really struggling with just keeping your head around everything that's on your plate. I recently heard about this tool called Sauna. Maybe you've checked it out. I don't know if it's relevant to you or not, but I wanted to send it your way. Regardless of whether or not John ends up using Asana, doesn't matter, beside the point. The value is that you thought of him and sent him this email sharing something that you believed he would care about. If you can consistently deliver experiences like that to the most important people in your network once every 45 days, you are going to generate more opportunities. It's really, really that simple. And I know we're coming up to the end of the time we have here. We want to have some time for Q&A. So I'm going to focus on one last thing here, and then we'll open the floor to Q&A. A quick summary on this idea of tribe fellowship. We want more opportunities, whatever opportunity means for you. As we discussed, opportunities, referrals are largely driven by timing and mindshare. Timing we don't really care about because we have no control over it. Mindshare we have full control over. And mindshare is driven by two things: the frequency of your interactions and the what we call experience impact of your interactions. Frequency is fairly obvious. We want you interacting with these people relatively often. Not everyone in your network per se, but if we can identify the top 20 to 30 people in your network and put together some sort of a system, whether it's through a CRM or a task management tool like Asana or whatever, to ensure that you are touching these people once every 45 days. That's a good enough cadence, at least for the most important people. If you have a second tier, maybe it's once every 90 days for the second tier in your network, and once every 120 days for your third tier. That's the frequency side of things. More important than frequency, though, is what we call experience impact. You could touch someone every single day, but if there is no experience impact, if your interactions with them are not perceived as relevant or meaningful or valuable, then you're going to be spam. And they're going to, even though you're interacting with them frequently, they're not going to care. In fact, you will have the negative effect where they don't like you because you're interacting with them so much and there is no value or so little value in your interactions that you're just noise at that point. So we want to make sure that every interaction you deliver is perceived as relevant, meaningful, or valuable. And that comes from learning about people. As you meet with them, find out what they care about. What are they struggling with? What do they need right now? Learn those things, save them somewhere in some sort of a CRM or relationship management tool, whatever. And that allows you to touch base with them relatively regularly. And that could be as simple as you don't always need to say, hey, here's an introduction. Hey, here's a podcast. Hey, here's a blog post. It can be hey, I was just thinking about the conversation we had 6 months ago, and you shared some really interesting insights around how to think about electric vehicles. I know this is totally random, but that actually ended up leading to this fascinating conversation with a team member. And I wanted to reach out and say, thank you for giving me that perspective. I hadn't thought about it before. You're not giving them a quote unquote item of value, but you're still touching base with them in a meaningful way. You're making them feel important, making them feel valued by thanking them for something simple that they said. And that leads to my simplest and biggest tip when it comes to this idea of fellowship and relationship management. If we can get you in the habit of sending one email a day to someone in your network you would not otherwise have reached out to, that means you're not replying to emails, that doesn't count. You're sending a new outbound email to someone in your network you would not have reached out to otherwise that day. Over the course of a year, that's what is that, like 280 emails if you're doing just Monday through Friday, 280 new emails over the course of a year, something like that. I almost guarantee that at least one of those emails will lead to some type of opportunity that you would not otherwise have had access to. The goal isn't to make all 280 or however many emails generate an opportunity. They won't. The majority of the emails will not immediately generate an opportunity. But usually, one opportunity is all it takes. Two opportunities is all it takes to justify the other 278 emails that you sent that didn't lead to anything other than just taking care of other people and showing that you care. And that can be, frankly, reason enough. So one email a day, set a reminder in your task management tool, Asana, Trello, whatever you're using, and start reaching out to people, managing these relationships in a more proactive, intentional way. And you will hear about more of the opportunities that you want. All right, wrapping things up here. Final thing I want to leave you with is it's a little bit of a cliche. Many people know this quote, but it is just so important. None of what we teach at Mind Maven is rocket science. In many cases, we don't reinvent the wheel. We don't come up with brand new systems or brand new concepts. We take very simple ideas, very simple workflows, things people have tried before or know they should be doing, and put systems in place that allow them to do it consistently. And it's really inspired by this quote by John Wooden. I am not a sports person, but anyone who is knows that he is a very famous basketball coach. It says, when you improve a little bit each day, eventually big things occur. Don't look for the big improvement. Seek the small improvements one day at a time. That's what it's all about. You don't need to take every single one of the tactics I walked you through here today. And if you want to, great, go for it. But I would rather you pick one thing that you believe you can do consistently and do it consistently. And that's where you're going to see the big improvements. It's not the revolutionary, let's rip out the engine and rebuild everything about how I operate. That's overwhelming and frankly breaks things more often than it fixes anything. Look for the small things, practice those small things consistently. Big changes, big improvements occur. And with that, I am going to leave you with just this final slide here. If this resonated, if this is interesting, and you want to learn more about what we do, we are actually in the midst of writing our first book that takes the core Mind Maven principles and distills them down into written form for the first time. If you'd like to be on the advanced reader list for that, that means you get free access to the chapters as they are ready. The only thing we ask for is feedback. That you read it, you let us know, hey, this resonated. Hey, this feels like it missed the mark. I don't understand this. Whatever. Feedback and in return, you get the book for free over the course of time. And if that's relevant, you can check out the link bit.ly/mm advanced reader, or in the follow-up content we'll be sending out after this. There's also a link to it there. So feel free to sign up. We'll get you a copy of the book, and I would love to hear your feedback. And with that, I say we move on to, I see Michelle asking for the link for the book. Cesar just dropped that into chat for you. I say we open the floor to Q&A unless there's anything else you wanted to cover real quick, Colin.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Connor. I continue to learn some great tips from you.
I appreciate that.
Focusing on productivity may feel unproductive in the moment, but is extremely productive in the long run. So I use a lot of these things that you've taught us, so appreciate it. For those of you who haven't dropped your question for Connor in the chat or in the Q&A box, please drop them before we launch. I'm just going to launch a quick poll on what's keeping you up at night. So I use this, and we use this as the team at the center, to understand what topics that you would like to learn over the next couple of months as a responsive organization to you, the entrepreneur's needs. We use this data all the time to put the targets on the wall for the next one. So it looks like marketing's in the lead. Thank you all for putting that in. I'm going to end this poll, share those results, because we've got some good questions. And if you haven't already, drop your question for Connor in the Q&A box at the bottom. Marketing is in the lead, and finance is right at the same. So good thing is in the end of the event, we'll share our upcoming events, but we've got a bunch of marketing and finance stuff coming around the pipe. So, Connor, if you wanted to stop sharing your screen, we could have a conversation around these questions we've got.
Perfect. Let's see what we've got. So I see two here, right? We've got Shanti and Michelle. I see a couple of hands raised in the attendee list too. I'm not sure if that was an interaction to something I was saying earlier on, if there is a question. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in either the chat box or the Q&A, and I'll answer them. But the two that we have so far, would you suggest or recommend masterminding for those who have been pursuing entrepreneurship for some time as opposed to mentorship? I wouldn't say there is a blanket right answer to that, nor would I say it's necessarily an either or. You should do mastermind or you should do mentorship. I think there's value in both. I think surrounding yourself with not just peers, when we talk about masterminding, surrounding yourself not just with peers who are at your level, but ideally those who are maybe one or two steps further ahead of you in the journey, who have seen some of the challenges that you're going to encounter or can offer some insight, is going to be really valuable. So if you're going to mastermind, try and go one step above where you're at. And the same is true for mentorship as well. Having people who are peers, who are exactly where you are, is great. But when it comes to mentors, we're looking for people who are a little bit, again, 2-3 steps ahead of where you are. And if you want to have a mastermind group and a mentor, great. If you want one or the other, great. But I would say if you had to pick one, you don't. But if you had to pick one, I'd say a mentor, someone who can offer some of the more one-on-one personalized feedback. But I would recommend trying to find a community that you can plug yourself into, where you can be surrounded by peers. There's a bunch of them out there. There's invite-only ones like YPO. There's obviously Nasdaq Center is amazing. There's paid ones like On Deck. We're big fans of On Deck there for the tech sphere. So there's a bunch of them out there. Find something that resonates with you, plug into it, and invest into those relationships. Did that answer your question? Feel free to either, if I didn't, drop it in chat or provide some more context in the Q&A box. I'm going to move on to Michelle's question. Do you use Asana with HubSpot or another CRM? Norm, I see your question. I'll circle to that in just a second. So Michelle, Asana is a great tool for task management. If there is a to-do on your list, whether it's something you want to do today or 6 months down the road, Asana is great for that. When it comes to relationship management, I do recommend having a dedicated separate tool for that. You can make Asana work, but it's not built to be a relationship manager. So typically, I recommend, the term CRM I struggle with, just because a lot of people do think of things like Salesforce and HubSpot. There's nothing wrong with Salesforce or HubSpot. It's kind of like buying a Ferrari to go to the grocery store. It's almost too big, too powerful a tool for often how you would use it. There's a lot of great lightweight tools out there, relationship management tools that aren't so much about sales as they are just managing relationships. Why am I blanking? Nimble is a great one. Nimble, there's Close, CLOZE. There's also Close, CLOSE, but they're much more of a sales tool. Close with a Z is more of kind of a personal relationship management one. And the one that I am most excited about right now, it's relatively new, it's still being developed, but it's called Clay. It's clay.earth is their title or their URL. Really interesting looking tool, but again, it is in development, it's in the early stages. So I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. All that to say, to circle back to your answer, I do recommend two separate tools, Asana for tasks and a CRM for relationship management. Norma, you said, did I hear something about engagement manager training? Yes, at the risk of making it sound like a plug, and I'm going to do my best to avoid that. That's a big part of what we do. At Mind Maven, the way our program works is we work with the executives. We pair them with one of our coaches like myself or someone else, and we pair their engagement manager or their EA with one of our EA trainers. And it's meant to be done in tandem, where the exec learns something, the EA learns something, like the email dictation, for instance, and then you spend a week iterating on it, come back together, and then calibrate on the existing systems and introduce something new. So that's how the training works. We do recruiting on that as well. But to make this not sound like a selfless plug, I'm going to pause that there unless you have any more specific questions on it.
Love that. Connor, we also had some pre-submitted questions that I'd love to address, unless everyone live wants to ask more questions. But are there things you do when you're still a single person company to get set yourself up for growth later?
At the risk of this sounding like a cop-out answer, that everything I talked you through here today. But if you had to pick one or two things, I would say white space time. That is one of the hardest. When I work with clients who have that 40 to 60 person company, finding that consistent 4-hour block, helping build that habit into someone who is back to back to back to back because they have a larger company at that point is very challenging. If you can get in the habit now of having that time blocked on your calendar before the company scales up to that level, your life is going to be infinitely easier, and you're going to be able to know with consistency, no matter how busy I get, no matter how much we scale, I will always have this time for proactive work. So white space time is number one. And two, use at least some of that white space time, maybe the first half an hour every single week, for relationship management. There's nothing else that you can invest into that is going to have a bigger ROI for your organization. One email a day. You can do more than that, but if nothing else, you can get in the habit of 1 email a day or 5 a week if you want to batch it. It's going to lead to huge opportunities you would never even hear about otherwise.
I love that. Yeah. And time blocking is something that I've been doing for a long time, but I like your vein on putting a dedicated, like the same time every day.
Yes.
Mine's always all over the place. So I'm like, yep, I have an hour here. I'm just going to focus on that. But so yeah, part of the routine that you mentioned, I think is helpful.
Good. And some people, they can do the sporadic. I know every week you find a different time. What I would say, and this is just kind of specific feedback to you, Colin, is if you want to do it more sporadically, that's fine. But I would still try and stick to the larger blocks of time rather than an hour here and there. Try and find absolute minimum 2 hours, just because white space proactive work is usually requires larger chunks of time than you can usually get to in an hour.
Yeah, catch me. Let me check my calendar. I have 3 hours of white space time this afternoon.
Love it. All right.
Because we have a board meeting coming up. So there we go. Let's see. Yep. You talked a lot about helping some founders understand their productivity paths towards fundraising. So can you talk a little bit about how to just continue to run the engine, i.e. make sales, develop product, run team, and fundraise at the same time, and how to like kind of organize your brain in there?
Yes. So one of the bigger time sinks when it comes to fundraising is the act of fundraising, the act of reaching out, trying to generate these opportunities. You can, I know this doesn't immediately help anyone who is, I'm fundraising right now and I'm in this, but if you're doing it now, this is not the last time you will fundraise. So if you can start with this relationship management work now, so you are generating these opportunities in advance. So when you are ready to fundraise again, all you're really doing is reaching out and saying, hey, I'm ready. We're ready to start raising money. Are you interested? It can cut down the time that it takes to actively, quote unquote, fundraise by a third, I'd say at the least. So that's one. You can just invest in your future a little bit by doing some of the work now, building those relationships with investors, or letting your current investors know, hey, here's the types of opportunities we're looking for. Your other peers, letting them know, hey, 3 months from now we're going to start a new fundraising round. Here's kind of what we're looking for. These types of people encounter, they meet investors all the time, and you want them to think of you and connect this person to you, even if you have to practice the art of no and say, hey, we're not fundraising right now, but we're probably going to start another round in 6 months. Can I reach out to you then? And then over the course of that 6 months, having these touch points. So you're not reaching out totally cold 6 months from now saying, hey, give me money. So that's one. Two is, of course, I'm trying to avoid giving the same answer, but white space time, having the dedicated time blocked out, especially during crazy seasons like fundraising, going to be worth its weight in gold. And finally, again, circling back here, but the whole conversation around task management, knowing what your priorities are. One of those 3 top priorities will be fundraising, but you're going to have 2 more. So knowing what those 2 are, having absolute clarity on what they are, so you always know, they're always top of mind, and using a task management tool to structure your day in advance. So in addition to fundraising, here's the 3 things I have to do today. Goes a really long way.
Super helpful advice. And yeah, the best time to raise money is when you don't need it.
That's right.
We're at time, and all of this has been super valuable. But if you were going to give a golden nugget takeaway for everybody still on the call, what's the one thing that you want everyone to take away today?
I'd say it's no man is an island, and the single greatest thing you can invest into, whether you're a 1-person company or a 10,000 person company, is relationships. Figure out who they are, the key people are in your network, invest into them, take care of them, and they'll take care of you.
What a great way to end it. Well, Connor, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your community or your expertise with the community again. It's been great to have you back. I took up some more tips and tricks. So thank you all on behalf of everyone on our team and everyone in attendance. Thank you so much for joining us again, Connor.
Appreciate the opportunity, Colin. Always great to be a part of it.
Love it. And for those of you still on, we'd love for you to join us for our upcoming webinars and give us feedback on what you'd like to see next. So we're going to be providing some links in the chat that you can use to check out what's coming next, and also to give us what you would like to see in the next coming months. But we appreciate you all joining us today. We hope this was valuable, and we look forward to welcoming you all back online soon. Have a good one, everyone.